They fined me $30,000 for a cabin they didn't even control. No warning, no explanation. Just a notice shoved in my mailbox like I was some criminal. At first, I laughed. I thought, there's no way this is serious. My cabin isn't even in their HOA. But then the threats came. Emails, letters, strangers snapping photos of my property, and finally, a lien notice. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a targeted attack. But what they didn't count on was that I don't back down from bullies. Especially not the kind who wear fake smiles and hold HOA clipboards like their badges of power. They thought I was just some lone cabin owner. What they didn't know, I had a copy of the original land deed, signed before their HOA even existed. And once I brought that into court, everything they'd built, every lie, every scam, crumbled in front of a judge. You ever wonder how far an HOA will go when they think you're too small to fight back? You're about to find out. This isn't just about money. This is about a group of people who let their little taste of authority turn into full-blown corruption. And the moment I pulled back the curtain on their scheme, they weren't just facing me. They were facing the LAW.SO. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that pushed too far, or dreamed of seeing them finally face consequences, you're in for something real. Because what started as a simple property dispute turned into a courtroom showdown that no one saw coming. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at a neighborhood HOA the same way again. I wasn't some millionaire looking to flip property. I was just a guy trying to breathe again. After losing my mom to a sudden stroke and going through a brutal divorce within the same year, life had worn me down to the bone. The noise, the pace, the expectations, it all became too loud. I needed space. Not just physical space, but emotional quiet. Somewhere I could hear myself think without the city screaming back. That's when I found it. A weathered cabin tucked away in the wooded hills, just past the ridge of Pinebrook Lake. It wasn't listed on Zillow or some flashy site. I found it through a friend who knew the original owner, an elderly man who just wanted the place to go to someone who'd appreciate its peace. The moment I stepped foot on the wraparound porch and heard nothing but birds and rustling trees, I knew this was it. My reset button, and here's the kicker. This cabin? It sat outside the HOA boundary. That was the whole point. The lake was divided. One side was swallowed by a fancy HOA that patrolled kayaks, painted fences, and measured mailbox heights. The other side, the side I bought on, was free land. No association. No duos. No power-hungry busybodies knocking on your door about your wind chimes. Just trees, stars, and silence that I did everything by the book. Title search? Check. Land survey? Check. Deed verification? Triple check. I even had my lawyer confirm it wasn't under any HOA jurisdiction. No clauses. No asterisk. This was my land, fair and square. For the first few months, it was pure bliss. I'd wake up to fog rolling off the lake, drink coffee on the porch with my dog at my feet, and feel something I hadn't in years. Peace. I fixed up the place myself, put in a wood stove, repaired the dock, planted wildflowers along the path leading down to the water. I wasn't trying to flip it or turn it into an Airbnb. This cabin was for me, a place to heal. And then they came. It started small. A letter in a plastic bag taped to my gate. Welcome to the Pinebrook Lakeside community. Please remit your $3,000 annual dues to avoid late penalties. Wait, what? I thought maybe they made a mistake. Surely they didn't realize I was on the non-HOA side of the lake. I called the number listed. The woman who answered sounded nice enough, until I told her where my property was. Oh yes. We've redrawn the boundary lines to include your section now. All residents are expected to comply. I paused. You can't just redraw lines and decide you control my land. That's not how this works. She chuckled. She actually chuckled. I suggest you consult the updated covenant. We'll be sending a community compliance officer out next week for an inspection. That was the first crack. I hadn't even seen their faces yet, but I could already feel the storm building. I went straight back to my property record. I wasn't wrong. My land sat on parcel 12, and their documents clearly covered only parcels 1 through 10. There had been no official update filed with the county. Nothing was recorded. No votes taken. It was a phantom expansion, done in secret with no legal teeth. And that's when I realized, this wasn't about dues. This was about control. They wanted to absorb my land to raise their property values and tighten their grip on the entire lakeside. I should have walked away then. I should have ignored them, hired a lawyer, and put up a sign that said private property, not HOA. But part of me, maybe the part that had lost so much and finally found something worth protecting, didn't want to run. So I stood my ground. Little did I know, they were already preparing to bury me in fines. It started with a knock. Not the friendly kind. The kind that comes with a clipboard, a smirk, and an attitude that says, "We own this place, and you're the problem." I opened the door to find a man in a cheap polo shirt with the Pinebrook HOA logo stitched on it. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't even say hello. He just pointed at my porch railing. "That stain color isn't HOA approved. You'll need to strip and repaint it within 10 business days to avoid a non-compliance penalty." I blinked. What? He sighed like he'd had this conversation 1,000 times with idiots. Regulation 4B, Uniform Visual Standards. All deck stains must conform to the natural pine palette. I stared at him, trying to decide whether to laugh or slam the door. "Buddy, I'm not in your HOA." He didn't flinch. "We sent you a welcome packet. Your parcel was added in the January expansion." "There was no expansion," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "You can't just add private property to your association like it's a grocery list." He smiled. "You're free to challenge it with the board. In the meantime, consider this your first official warning." Then he handed me a laminated sheet, like a menu listing over 40 HOA rules I'd supposedly agreed to. Fence height, garden gnome restrictions, even guidelines for dock rope color. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coordinated, cold-blooded attempt to claim my land without legal backing, through intimidation, and they didn't stop there. Over the next few days, the letters started coming. Certified mail, bright yellow envelopes, even hand-delivered notices placed in plastic sleeves nailed to my fence post like eviction signs. Each one had the HOA seal. Each one accused me of violating something ridiculous. Unauthorized satellite dish, it came with the cabin. Unregistered kayak on the water, yes, seriously. Failure to remove non-native foliage, I planted wildflowers. One even cited a violation for excessive leaf debris on my driveway after a storm. The fines totaled $2,500 by the end of the month. And every time I pushed back, I got the same smug response. You're within the expanded Pinebrook community now. These are the standards we enforce for everyone's benefit. I contacted the county records office again to confirm what I already knew. They had no record of any boundary change, no updated charter, no legal vote filed. I brought this up to the HOA's compliance officer, a woman named Janice who always wore sunglasses too big for her face and had a permanent scowl like she just sucked a lemon. Her response: "Oh, we're in the process of filing it. It's already been approved internally. You'll want to cooperate before it becomes official." Let me say this loud for anyone who's never tangled with a rogue HOA. Internal approval doesn't mean a damn thing in court, but they didn't care. Because they were counting on me folding. They thought I'd get tired. That I'd give in, pay the fines, and repaint my deck like a good little sheep. They didn't know that I wasn't just some weekend cabin owner. I lived there. Full-time. This was my home. My refuge. The place that kept me sane after a year that nearly broke me. And now they were trying to infect it with their arrogance. But the worst part? They weren't done. One morning, I woke up to find two men walking the edge of my property with clipboards, measuring tape, and a drone buzzing over the roof of my cabin. I stormed outside in my boots and flannel, heart pounding. "What the hell are you doing?" The younger one didn't even look up. "HOA perimeter survey." I pointed to the edge of the woods. "Your perimeter ends 4 parcels that way." He shrugged. "We were told this one's under review. We're just following instructions." I snapped a photo of their vehicle license plate and called the sheriff. But by the time a deputy arrived, they were gone. The officer was sympathetic, but said unless they were caught trespassing, there wasn't much he could do. That night, I sat on my porch and stared out at the dark lake water, trying to calm the fury boiling in my chest. What gave them the right? What made these people think they could bully, fine, and harass someone out of their own property based on nothing but self-declared authority? Then I realized something. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't an isolated misunderstanding. They had done this before, maybe not to someone who pushed back, but to someone quieter, someone more afraid. And if I didn't stop it now, I'd be another cautionary tale. Another cabin swallowed into their HOA kingdom without a fight. So I decided, no more polite emails. No more ignoring their notices. I was going to dig. I was going to find out who these people really were, and exactly how far over the line they'd already stepped. You'd think after I challenged them, they'd slow down, maybe even back off. They didn't. They went harder. Within a week, my mailbox was flooded, 14 separate violation notices in 5 days. Some were repeats, others completely fabricated. One accused me of installing a non-compliant fire pit, which I hadn't even touched since buying the place. Another claimed unauthorized exterior lighting, referring to the solar path lights I picked up from the hardware store. There was even one that cited visible storage of water hoses. Water hoses. But the real kicker? A formal notice stating that if I failed to resolve all outstanding compliance issues within 10 business days, they would initiate lien proceedings to claim unpaid fines, now totaling over $12700. That's when I realized this wasn't incompetence. This was a strategy. They were using harassment as a weapon to overwhelm me, to drown me in paperwork and anxiety until I either gave in or sold the cabin. They didn't want compliance, they wanted control. And they were willing to lie, forge, and fabricate their way to it. I tried calling the number listed on the letters. Voicemail. Every time. I left messages. Sent emails. No response. Then, something even more disturbing happened. One morning, I stepped outside to find a neon orange sticker slapped across my front door. It read, "Property under enforcement review. Do not modify without approval." It looked official, like some kind of county code enforcement warning. But in small print at the bottom, I spotted the truth. Pinebrook HOA Enforcement Division. I ripped it off and threw it in the fire pit. That night, I reviewed my outdoor security camera footage, and there it was. Around 2:47 a.m., a man in a hoodie walked onto my porch, slapped the sticker on the door, and left. He wasn't even trying to be sneaky. They weren't just escalating, they were taunting me now. I took the footage to the sheriff's office and filed a harassment report. The deputy sympathized, but his hands were tied. "They're not technically trespassing unless you've posted a notice," he said. "Fine." Next day, I printed 3 massive, "No trespassing, private property, not subject to HOA authority" signs and posted them at every entrance, gate, and trail leading to my cabin. But the next escalation wasn't through the mail or stickers. It came with a chainsaw. I was working on some repairs at the dock when I heard it, this growling mechanical noise from up the hill. I ran back toward the cabin and froze. 2 men, wearing neon vests with Pinebrook Maintenance printed on them, were cutting down a tree at the edge of my driveway. I shouted, "HEY! What the hell are you doing?" They looked up casually. One of them said, "HOA brush clearing. It's part of the wildfire protection plan. This isn't your land." They shrugged. "We were told it was now included. If you've got a problem, take it up with the board." They packed up and left, leaving a half-felled tree hanging over my drive like a guillotine. At that point, my hands were shaking. Not just with anger, but disbelief. They were acting like they already owned the place. Like I was just a temporary inconvenience they needed to push out before making my land officially theirs. So I made a decision. I drove 2 hours into the city to meet with a property lawyer I'd found online, someone who specialized in HOA overreach and land dispute cases. His name was Greg, and within 10 minutes of showing him the letters, videos, and the bogus fine list, he leaned back and whistled. "They're bluffing," he said. "And it's not just unethical. A few of these moves? Flat out illegal." He explained that while HOAs do have power within their jurisdiction, they cannot expand boundaries without official county approval and resident vote, issue fines or liens outside their designated area, enter or alter private land without consent. Everything they were doing, the letters, the drone, the tree removal, was built on a fantasy. They were banking on one thing, that I'd never call their bluff. But I was done playing defense. Greg helped me file a cease and desist letter, sent via certified mail to every board member of the Pinebrook HOA. It cited property law, land survey documents, and the original deed showing my cabin existed outside their domain. It gave them 72 hours to stop all contact, harassment, and trespassing, or we'd pursue civil charges. And just like that, silence. For 3 days, not a sound. Not a letter. Not a drone. I let myself believe. Maybe they finally got the message. I was wrong. Because on the 4th day, I got an email from my ban, notice of lien filing against property, $30,048, outstanding claim from Pinebrook HOA. My jaw dropped. They had done it. They had actually filed a lien. No hearing. No due process. just a digital document attached to my property name. Greg told me this was a common scare tactic among rogue HOAs. But that didn't mean it wasn't serious. If left uncontested, a lien could block refinancing, resale, even lead to forced payment through escrow. They were trying to trap me financially. To corner me until I caved. But this time, they picked the wrong man. I printed every document, every photo, every boundary map, and I walked them straight into the county courthouse, where I filed a formal injunction and prepared to bring this HOA into a courtroom battle they weren't ready for. And what I discovered during that process, let's just say, they had a whole lot more to hide than just fake fines. You ever dig into something thinking you'll find a mess, but end up uncovering a full-blown conspiracy? That's what this turned into. At first, I just wanted to stop the fines, stop the harassment, remove the lien and go back to fixing up my little cabin in peace. But the deeper I went into the records, emails, and county filings, the clearer it became. This HOA wasn't just out of bounds, they were out of control. My lawyer, Greg, and I started by pulling all official documents filed by the Pinebrook Lakeside HOA over the past 5 years. Guess what we found? Nothing. No legally recorded boundary expansion. No vote by the original homeowners. No approval from the county zoning board. No updated map, charter, or tax filing to support their claim. In short, this expansion they kept referencing, it didn't exist. Not on paper. Not in law. Not in reality. So we dug deeper. Greg had a friend in zoning who helped us cross-reference land parcel numbers and overlay old plat map. The result? My cabin, and 4 others on the far side of the lake, were all clearly outside HOA jurisdiction. That's when something clicked. If I wasn't the only one, who else had they targeted? I started knocking on doors. 3 cabins were empty, vacation homes. But the 4th belonged to a retired schoolteacher named Marie. She'd lived there for almost 2 decades. When I told her what was happening to me, her face went pale. "You too," she whispered. "They've been after me for the last 2 years." She showed me an entire binder full of letters, notices, and receipts. They'd fined her over $18,000 for things like outdated shingle color, improperly stacked firewood, and refusing to install HOA-mandated fencing. Marie had paid most of it. She was alone, tired. She didn't know she had the right to fight back. That broke me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every single person they'd scared, bullied, or robbed with fake authority. So we launched a full investigation. Greg filed a Freedom of Information request with the county. We requested email records, HOA board meeting minutes, financial filings, and land development permits. And that's when things started to unravel fast. We discovered that 2 HOA board members, Stan Wilkerson, president, and Elaine Martin, treasurer, had submitted multiple fake internal votes on record to justify their expansion claims. None of these had homeowners' signatures or verified attendance. Just vague references like, motion passed by 12-1 consensus, expansion of HOA boundaries to include parcel 12. It was like they were writing fiction, and they weren't even hiding it well. Then came the big one. Buried deep in the county's financial disclosures, we found a reimbursement request from Elaine for legal consultation regarding HOA boundary dispute. The amount, $14200, paid out of the HOA's reserve fund. Only problem, that legal consultation never happened. We contacted the law firm listed, and they confirmed they'd never been hired by Pinebrook HOA for any expansion-related case. Elaine had cut herself a personal check. Fraud.straight-up embezzlement.at that point, Greg smiled and leaned back in his chair. We don't just have a property dispute anymore, he said. We have them for fraud, falsified documentation, abuse of power, financial misappropriation, and harassment. This wasn't just civil court anymore. We had enough to walk this straight into a criminal investigation, but I wasn't done yet. I wanted to know why. Why risk all this for a cabin on the edge of the woods? And then it hit me. I started looking at the zoning map again, and noticed something I hadn't before. My land, along with Marie's and the others, sat just outside the current HOA, but more importantly, it bordered a tract of undeveloped land owned by a private development company. I looked them up. Guess who sat on their board? Stan Wilkerson. It all clicked. This wasn't about uniform standards. It wasn't about fences or firewood or satellite dishes. This was about control, because if Stan and Elaine could absorb our parcels into the HOA, they could increase the association's square footage, raise their influence, and push for rezoning approvals that would spike the land's value. Our homes were in the way. We weren't violations. We were obstacles. So they decided to scare us out, fine us dry, and file fake liens to make our properties look like financial liabilities. They were trying to forcibly devalue our land so their company could buy us out cheap. But they didn't count on one thing, me fighting back, and this time I wasn't fighting alone. Marie agreed to join the case. Greg filed a class action complaint representing multiple cabin owners. We included video evidence, sworn affidavits, drone footage, and financial records that laid bare the entire scam. And when we sent the full packet to the HOA board, silence. For a week. Then, resignations. 3 board members quit overnight. But not Stan. Not Elaine. They stood their ground. And that was fine by me. Because the court date was set. And what they didn't know, we had one last ace up our sleeve. One of the HOA's own former compliance officers, someone who couldn't sleep at night after watching what was happening, had agreed to testify, and what she revealed in court would blow everything wide open. The courtroom wasn't big. No grand columns or echoing marble halls. Just polished wood, dusty windows, and one flag standing limp behind the judge's bench. But to me, it felt like a battleground. I sat in the plaintiff's row, next to Greg and Marie, with a manila folder so thick it could have passed for a novel, a story about lies, bullying, corruption, and greed. Across the aisle, Stan Wilkerson, Elaine Martin. Their new attorney, young, arrogant, and clearly underestimating what was about to happen. They looked calm, almost bored. Elaine kept checking her phone. Stan leaned back like this was a formality. They had no idea what was coming. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with steel-gray hair and the stare of a hawk, called the room to order. We began. Greg stood first. Calm. Clear. Unshakable. He didn't start with emotion or outrage. He started with facts. The official Pinebrook HOA charter, signed, sealed, and recorded, clearly defined the community boundary. Parcel 12, my land, lay outside those boundaries. No recorded expansion existed. No vote. No filing. No map update. Nothing. He laid the documents down like dominoes. Then came the HOA's defense. Their lawyer argued that the board had collective authority to interpret boundaries based on community growth. Greg didn't even flinch. Your Honor, he said, holding up a printed email, This is a message from the county zoning office, confirming no application for expansion has ever been submitted or approved by Pinebrook HOA. He handed it to the judge. Then he pulled out the drone footage, the survey overlays, the cease and desist letter, the forged meeting notes where they claimed a vote that never occurred. Each piece chipped away at the HOA's story, but the turning point came when Greg called his surprise witness, Rachel Green. Rachel had worked for the HOA as a compliance officer for 2 years, and once she was sworn in, she didn't hold back. She testified that Stan personally directed her to monitor properties outside the HOA for pre-compliance documentation. Elaine instructed her to backdate violation letters to look like repeated offenses. The so-called expansion vote had never happened, and she was told to say it had, or risk losing her job. Gasps echoed in the courtroom. Elaine's face turned ghost white. Stan leaned forward for the first time all day, elbows on the table, eyes narrowed. But he didn't speak. Rachel wasn't done. She revealed that the HOA had a secret working relationship with a local developer, one looking to rezone lakeside land for commercial use. She even provided meeting dates and names of 2 county contacts who had been approached about future rezoning plans. That was the last nail in the coffin. The judge sat quietly for a moment, looking over the mountain of evidence. Then she spoke. This court finds that the Pinebrook Lakeside HOA, under the leadership of Mr. Wilkerson and Ms. Martin, engaged in unauthorized jurisdictional overreach, fraudulent enforcement practices, and targeted harassment of private property owners. And then, word by word, she laid out the penalties. The lien against my property? Nullified. Permanently removed. All fines against me and Marie? Cancelled, with full restitution ordered. HOA officers found responsible? Individually liable for damages. A formal complaint to be filed with the district attorney for potential criminal fraud and embezzlement charges. Stan didn't even look up. Elaine started crying, and me? I sat there, gripping the arms of my chair, feeling vindicated for the first time in months. They had tried to drown me in fake rules, scare tactics, and legal red tape. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd fold. But they forgot something simple. You don't corner someone on their own land and expect them not to fight back. As we walked out of that courtroom, people from the gallery, some I'd never met, shook our hands. Marie smiled through tears. Greg patted me on the back. But it wasn't over yet, because outside those walls, the fallout had just begun. Local reporters were already sniffing around. HOA members who'd remained silent were now furious. Several homeowners filed petitions to dissolve the board entirely. County officials launched their own investigation into every project the HOA had pushed in the last 3 years. And as for the developer, let's just say rezoning requests suddenly stopped showing up. My land, once buried in bogus violations, was now free. No fines. No surveillance. No clipboard clutching tyrants knocking on my door. Just trees, water, peace. Exactly how it was always meant to be. I thought the courtroom verdict would be the end of it. But in a way, it was only the beginning, because when the judge ruled in my favor and named names, Stan Wilkerson, Elaine Martin, and their inner circle, something cracked open inside the community they'd spent years controlling, and what started as whispers became a flood of confessions, resignations, and rage. Within 48 hours of the ruling, a local reporter published a headline that exploded across town. HOA board faces fraud allegations over fake fines and land grab attempt. The article detailed everything: the illegal boundary expansion, the falsified documents, the bogus liens, even the developer connection. Greg had offered a few on-the-record quotes, and Rachel, our brave witness, confirmed everything with a written affidavit. That's when the calls started pouring in. One man said he'd been fined $800 for planting tomatoes in his side yard. A single mom shared that she'd paid over $5,000 in pet fees over the last 2 years. One for each new dog tag they demanded every time she fostered a rescue animal. Another family admitted they'd moved out of their dream home altogether after being labeled non-compliant and banned from community events over a garage door color that didn't blend with the neighborhood's seasonal aesthetic. It was like someone had pulled the plug on a dam, and the HOA board, they went into full damage control mode. Their official website shut down, community emails went silent. The HOA office, usually staffed every weekday, sat dark with paper covering the windows. Even the Facebook group they ruled with an iron fist turned into a war zone of angry homeowners demanding answers. But the most powerful blow didn't come from the media. It came from within. At the next scheduled board meeting, the first since the court ruling, over 100 homeowners showed up, some holding signs, others waving documents. It was supposed to be held in the small clubhouse hall, but the crowd spilled out into the lawn and parking lot. I was there too. Not because I had to be, but because Marie asked me to come with her. She wanted to see them answer, face to face. Stan didn't show, Elaine didn't show. Instead, a meek vice chair named Laura stepped up and tried to read a carefully worded statement about regretful misunderstandings and unfortunate miscommunications. Someone shouted, "Is stealing $14,000 from community funds a miscommunication, Laura?" Another man yelled, "Where's our reserve money, huh? Where's the transparency?" The crowd erupted. They weren't scared anymore. They were furious, because now they knew the truth. For years they'd been manipulated, fined, threatened, and gaslit by people they trusted, people who smiled at BBQs and ran holiday raffles while quietly siphoning control and cash behind the scenes. That night, the community voted to suspend the entire board pending an independent audit. And that audit, it was brutal. It uncovered over $73,000 in miscellaneous expenses tied to personal travel, gift cards, and boutique purchases, unapproved bonuses paid to board members under the table, fake maintenance contracts awarded to companies that didn't exist or were owned by family members of board members. Even a landscaping bill for nearly $9,000 to clear invasive species from a plot of land that turned out to be an empty field behind Stan's personal vacation property. The community had been bled dry by fraud dressed up as formality. Soon, the homeowners filed a civil suit of their own, separate from mine, targeting the former board members for embezzlement, abuse of power, and financial damage. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about taking back what was stolen, and for the first time in years, the community came alive. Not under rules, not under fear, but under unity. People were talking again, meeting each other, sharing stories. Volunteers stepped up to form a temporary oversight committee. Marie was even asked to join it, and she did, proud and steady. Rachel? She moved out of the area, but before she left, the crowd gave her a standing ovation at a community town hall. As for me, I kept my cabin. But more than that, I kept my peace. No more fines. No more drone flyovers. No more phony letters taped to my door at 3 a.m., just wind in the trees, sunlight bouncing off the lake, and the feeling that for once I had truly stood my ground. They came after me with paperwork and threats. They tried to steal my land and my peace. They thought no one would fight back, but they were wrong. Because when the lies pile up high enough, they come crashing down, and sometimes when the whole rotten structure collapses, the people it crushed finally get to breathe again. You'd think after everything, the court battle, the public shaming, the audits, I'd feel pure joy. That I'd dance around my porch and scream, I won. But the truth, when the dust finally settled, I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved, like I could finally exhale after holding my breath for a year straight. Yes, the court ordered the HOA to pay back the $30,000 in illegal fines, plus interest. Yes, the judge ruled that their attempt to redraw boundaries was null and void, and yes, Stan Wilkerson and Elaine Martin were slapped with personal civil suits and ordered to appear before the county's Fraud Investigations Board. But what meant the most was a handwritten note I found on my porch one morning. It was from Marie. Thank you. You reminded all of us that silence helps no one. We just forgot we had a voice. That one line hit harder than any verdict. See, I never wanted to be a hero. I just wanted to protect what was mine. A quiet cabin on peaceful land, bought fair and square. But in the end, standing up for myself helped a whole community break free from a corrupt system that had choked the life out of it for years. And here's the real twist. After all that, some neighbors, folks who once looked the other way or feared rocking the boat, started dropping by the cabin. Not to complain, not to lecture, but to just talk, to say thank you, to ask about fishing spots, or how I built my stone fire pit, or whether my dog liked the lake. It wasn't about the cabin anymore. It was about connection. Community. The real kind. So if you're watching this and thinking, this could never happen to me, think again. HOAs, landlords, city inspectors, even your own boss, sometimes the people in power count on you staying quiet. They hope you'll doubt yourself, that you won't push back, that you'll pay the fine just to make it stop. But here's what they don't count on. They don't expect you to document everything. To gather your facts. To get angry, but stay smart. And most importantly, they don't expect you to fight back in front of everyone. And when you do, you'd be surprised how fast the bullies scatter. And how many others suddenly stand beside you. Question for you watching right now: have you ever been harassed, fined, or targeted by a corrupt HOA or someone in a position of power? Tell me in the comments, because I read every one. And your story? It might be the next one we tell. If this story made you angry, if it made you feel seen, or if you just love watching justice get served to entitled people in power, subscribe right now. Because this channel, it's not just about drama. It's about real people pushing back. And you never know, the next story might be yours.